Do you have leather dining chairs? Were you led to believe that they were real leather, only for them to end up looking like this?
Does it make you sad? Well, here at Camden Upholstery, we can help.
Hi, my name's Boston, and I'm not a lawyer, but I am an upholsterer. I may not be able to get you compensation for your troubles, but I can show you how to bring new life into your tired old flaky dining chairs. Crusty. Just a few simple steps and a bit of patience, we can get your chairs looking good as new. Stay tuned to find out how.
Okay, well that's enough of that. First thing you're going to want to do is go through and find the least flaky dining chair that you can find. And then we're going to flip her upside down and just start taking off the bottom cloth and all the staples that are under there, and basically get ourselves down to the foam. There's another camera angle so you can get a better look at what I'm doing. Just rip that off. And I'm using, you don't need special tools for this, I'm using a rubber mallet and a screwdriver that I ground down to a point. You could use a flathead screwdriver, or you could buy a staple lifter. There's plenty of options. I've always gone down the cheap route with this because I'm always misplacing it. I've actually had this one for a few years now and it hasn't disappeared too often. But yeah, it's just a screwdriver that I just ground down to a point. Nothing fancy. And then just with a pair of pliers, just pull out those staples that we've knocked loose. And then there's a little flap here that pulls the inside back and seat down. We're just going to knock the staples out of that so we can pull that through. And again, just pulling those staples out with the pliers, ready to start pulling this cover off. So getting it back on its feet, just start slowly peeling back the old cover. Being careful not, sometimes it can get stuck to the foam. You want to be careful not to rip that unless you plan on replacing all the foam. I didn't need to on this one. It was actually, in fairness, the chairs are in really good condition. It's just the fake leather that was sold as real leather was gone flaky and horrible. It happens all the time, especially from those big furniture retailers that offer you quality but really don't. Not naming any names, but now just pulled the seat foam off and now just pulling out the staples from one side of the webs, and then we'll just stretch them out again just to tighten them up. I'm using my hide strainers on this one, but you can just pull them with your hands as I'll demonstrate here. And then just trim it off with a knife and go through, do all of them, and then you can put your seat foam back on. I use a bit of spray glue there just to hold it down, but you could just stick it on and pop some staples in it or just leave it floating. Then we'll tuck this bit back in, make sure everything's nice and even on both sides, and then with the old cover we're going to go along and mark points all around it that we're then going to, once we've unpicked the sewing, we'll notch those out with our scissors and use them as a guide to know where we need to sew and where everything lines up. And then with a knife or a razor blade or a seam ripper if you've got one, we're just going to carefully start picking away at the stitching and getting each of our panels out by themselves individually so that we can start using them as templates. Now, with a nice hot iron, we're just gonna steam and press those edges down, make everything as flat as we can so that we can use these as templates or patterns for cutting out the fabric we're gonna be using. Roll out the fabric, get everything moved out of the way, and then I like to start with the largest piece. So first of all, we're going to cut out those notches that I mentioned earlier. Make sure that they translate to the other side. So mark them out there, and then notch them again on the other side, so it's on both sides. Then laying it out on the fabric, making sure you know which direction your pile is going in. You want the pile of fabric to go down if it has one, so it brushes down smoothly as opposed to feeling prickly. You don't want to feel any resistance. And then you cut that out, and then mark your notches, cut them out, and then it's literally just a case of copying this with every other piece that you have. So when you finish, you should have an outside back, an inside back, a seat, all of your side panel pieces, and a little bit of fabric to pull the inside back and seat down when you're upholstering. And then it's just a case of sewing it all together the way that you unpicked it. So I start off with the inside back and outside back, just joining them at the top, and then I flip that over and I just run a line of top sewing either side of that. It's not entirely necessary, it's just how these chairs were done originally, so despite changing the fabric choice, I want to keep everything else as original as possible. And then coming in with the seat, just join the back of the seat to the bottom of the inside back, adding that little bit of fabric that we're going to use to pull through in the middle. And we join our side panels. Make sure everything's in line, and then we just sew them. So starting at the end, one end, making sure that our notches are lined up. We just start sewing, lining up notches, sewing some more, lining up more notches and seams, and it'll make sense when you do it. And then just keep going until you get to the other end, and then repeat it on the other side. And now I'm just putting a line of top stitching in there, just along the front of those seams. Again, it's not completely necessary. Some people pipe it here. Some people do nothing. Like I say, I was just keeping everything as original to how they were, just without the horrible flaky leather. So now it's just a case of slipping that over the chair. You'll see there's a polythene bag over the top of the back. That's really a common practice for these kinds of chairs. It just makes everything a little bit easier to slide on. You'll probably find it's quite a tight fit. If it is, you've done it right. If it's too tight, you've done it wrong. If it's really loose, then you've definitely done it wrong. But just keep working it down, bit at a time, smoothing it out, getting it nice and even. And then up on the bench, we're gonna start thinking about how we're gonna get that little tongue through there. As you can see, I got a little bit confused. You often find with chairs like this, they're all a bit different. So I was looking at this, and that flap of fabric needs to come through here. Couldn't quite figure out how to do it, but having pulled back this bit of foam, I realise there's these staples here. Once I pull those out, this back should pry back enough for me to pull that bit of fabric through, tack it off, and then tack this bit of MDF back down. So let's go with that. So it might be a little surprising that I was so confused, but having done this for years, every job is a little bit different and you don't always know exactly what you're getting into. Okay, so as I mentioned, I've taken out these staples here, and now this bit of MDF opens up and I can pull that bit of fabric through, staple that back down, cover it up, pull the fabric over, done. Sweet, let's go. So yeah, there's quite a lot of blagging involved. As you can see here, I'm still struggling to get that tongue through. We get there eventually. It's just, sometimes you just got to make it up as you go. It's all part of the job. Anyone can do it. You just need to have a rough idea of how to get started and work from there. Right. So I've got the tongue through. Now I'm just working on getting the seat pulled over. Again, it's a nice tight fit, so it does take a little bit of strong arming, but get that nice and smoothed out. Pull the back down, work out those wrinkles, and now just slide that down. Just keep working it until it looks good. Get some staples, and we'll start with that tongue, give that a pull, tack it in place, and now again constantly working those wrinkles out, smoothing everything down, getting it where you want it. I'll put some temporary staples in, so that's where you don't shoot the staples all the way in. I tend to aim my gun at a bit of an angle, just make sure my fingers aren't in the way, and then just half staple the fabric in place so I can pull it out later. Now starting with the front, I'll just cut around my legs and then trim off the excess so I can then tuck that underneath. I'm using a tool called a regulator, but at this point you could use like a knitting needle or a butter knife or just something flat or slightly pointy but not sharp, just to work that under there. And then pulling out that first temporary, working the front of that seat over and tacking it in place with the staple gun. Now we move on to the sides and the back. So same as we did on the front, we'll just cut around the legs, trim off the excess, and we can start holding that under. And trying to figure out how to get our gun in there. Just start easing it and stapling it in place. Go same on the other side. Now, if you want to make your life a bit easier, when you're cutting out your side panels, make sure you add a little bit of extra fabric on the bottom. I didn't, and I really struggled to get this side on. I really should know better, but it seemed like there was quite a lot of fabric when I was ripping the old fabric off. So I didn't think to add some more. I should have. I got away with it, but yeah, if you want to make your life easier, don't cut yourself short. Just add a couple more inches. And all the time, just making sure that everything's in its place, working those corners with the regulator or pointy object of your choosing. And now we start smoothing out the outside back and tacking that in place. Trim off the excess fabric, and we're pretty much there. Okay, all that's left to do now is just chuck a bottom on it, dust cover, whatever you want to call it. It goes by many names, and we're good to go.
Well, here we are, good as new, no more flaking fake leather on the backs of your trousers. All it took was a few simple steps, which, if you're confident with a sewing machine, you'll be able to do yourself. You might need to get a staple gun. Don't necessarily have to get an industrial one and a compressor, although it does help. You could just use like a poster staple gun, or go old school, use tacks. But here it is, it's all nice and clean, nice and fresh, good as new. And if you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you didn't, let me know why in the comments, I'd love to know. But as always, I'll see you in the next one. Crusty.